The agenda this week assessed public health efforts to keep the coronavirus at bay and explored the legal context of the dispute on the Wet'suwet'en territory. The agenda's week in review begins with the 6 contenders, hoping to take the reins of the Ontario Liberal Party. Alvin, where does this party need to be?
We're a progressive party. We get elected on progressive ideas, but we have to have pragmatic solutions and pragmatic ways to implement them. And I think that's what differentiates us between us and the New Democrats, is that they have lofty goals in terms of their ambition and what they want to do, but there's no practical way of implementing that. And take our universal childcare program, for example. They want to only have it be amongst public sector in order to implement it. The amount of spaces that we need to provide universal childcare is enormous. We need to work with the existing system that we have right now. We need to talk about all our ideas as economic ones, right? All the social programs that we introduced have a huge economic impact, and Ontarians need to understand that impact, and we need to be better at delivering that message.
Brenda, your view on this?
I consider myself a centrist. I think it's important to communicate to Ontarians that we are mindful of spending their money and that there is no such thing as free childcare, free health care. It's all taxpayer funded. I know a lot of Liberals are concerned when we're not talking about looking at the deficit, especially when we're not in a recession. Liberals care about not running up a deficit. They care about leaving debt to their future, and I think we do have to be mindful of that.
Well, can I press you on that? Let's find out how much you all care about the deficit, because, of course, the previous Liberal governments had managed the finances of the province in such a way as to get back into balance, and once they did, they decided, apparently in the last election, that they weren't running on a balanced budget after all. They wanted to go back into significant deficit to pay for programs that were being promised. I hear you saying that you have an eye on the bottom line now, that you care about a lot more. Kate Graham, the deficit, how important is it to you to get that back to balance?
I believe I'm the only candidate here who has a plan and a fiscal anchor on my website about the debt and deficit. I think we need to acknowledge that we do have a lot of debt in Ontario. It is not from program spending. We have the lowest program spending per capita of any province in the country. It comes from the 2 big recessions, the one in 1990 and in 2007. We did not decrease our spending on programs as our revenues were going down, and it led to a lot of debt. So we need to set a long-term plan that includes a range of the debt to GDP ratio that we will not go outside. And I'm very committed to establishing that long-term plan and not moving outside it.
So if we're at 40% today, and it was 12% in Bill Davis's day, 40 years ago, where do we need to be and by when?
I've been asking lots. So my policy team is led by an economist, Mike Moffat, and I've been asking him what is the range that economists generally would advise. I think it's a little lower than where we are today. But for a long time, Ontario has been in the 30% range. And, the financing agencies seem to be very comfortable with that. So we need to set that target.
You're a former junior finance minister. How long should this province take to balance the books if you were premier?
I'm also the current finance critic for our party in our caucus. And, like Kate, I also have on my website my economic plan. It was posted today. And it does look at the cost of servicing our debt and our debt to GDP ratio. And that's important, as well as what the interest rates are in terms of the amount of revenues that we're taking in to service that debt. Now, the conditions right now are favorable. We have a lot of long-term debt at very favorable rates. It also matters what we're spending that money on. Is it on infrastructure that's going to be here for the next 100 years? That's going to grow and expand our economy. As much as in Bill Davis's era, it was at 12%. Well, we have 14.5 million people now in this province, and we have an economy that has grown under Liberal leadership by over $300 billion. And that's the question that I asked Premier Ford and his Conservatives, because right now they're not investing in those long-term things like education, in fact, that does grow our economy. And that's the focus that we have to have. We have to make sure that in good times that we make the right sets of decisions to not spend more than we take in. And when those economic downturns happen, people are going to turn to governments to do fiscal spending to stimulate the economy.
Okay, but Michael, and I don't mean this to sound like a chippy question, but my hunch is that a lot of people in this province thought during the last election there wasn't a spending program that Liberals didn't like, that where you could spend, they would. And it explains one of the reasons why the debt's approaching $350 billion and why the deficit is where it is today. How important would it be for you to balance the books?
It would be very important for me to balance the books. And I also think there's a huge misconception out there in regards to our debt. You know, you look at Bill Davis's government, he never balanced the budget once. You know, there were seven times in the last 40 years that budgets were balanced. I believe 5 by Liberals, 2 by Conservatives. And we have to look at the debt in this province and really understand what that means. Half of it's tied to infrastructure and assets, so we don't use the same calculations as other jurisdictions. And to say that Ontario is a subnational, when you compare the subnational or Ontario to other countries, we are in the top tier of countries when it comes to revenue, expenditure, size of economy. So I think we have to stop comparing Ontario to American states and other jurisdictions, provinces, and start to look at Ontario because of its taxation policy and the law that it, and the responsibility of the legislature, start to compare it against other countries, and you'll find that Ontario is in a very good place.
Stephen Del Duca, if you were Premier, how many years would you want before you balance the books?
So I think, Brenda made a point a couple of minutes ago. Look, at the end of the day, the people of this province work very, very hard for the money that they earn. And they have an expectation that when government invests the money that they've earned, that we invest things, that government invests in those things that matter most to them and their families. I think as Liberals, generally speaking, we believe in fiscal responsibility. We perform at our best when we are pursuing fiscal responsibility. But I also consider that if an individual Ontarian or a loved one of that Ontarian happens to fall sick and their entire life shrinks down to the size of a hospital bed, and they or their loved one is simply looking for an answer from a doctor or a nurse practitioner, in that critically vulnerable and important moment, that Ontarian's not contemplating what the exact size of the deficit is. They want a healthcare system that works for them and is on their side. And the same thing exists in education. The same thing exists in confronting the climate crisis. The same thing exists in places like the GTHA and beyond when it comes to transit investments. So I think it's important for us to be fiscally responsible, to consistently remind ourselves as we regain the trust of the people of this province that we do know how hard they work for their money, but we want to invest it on their behalf in the kind of progress that they need. And if we focus on that, again, I think we'll do well.
Okay, but I'm going to follow up here because I said, how many years do you want before you balance the books? How many years?
Yeah, so look, we don't know where we're going to be in 2022. I don't think there are many Ontarians left, including in his own caucus, who trust Doug Ford on the numbers. We're going to see in a number of weeks what allegedly the budget deficit is this year. We don't know where we're going to be in 2022. What I do know is that our public health care will be eroded. Our public education will continue to be under assault. There will be no credible plan to confront the climate crisis, and our economy will not have the kind of prosperity that's broadly shared. And so that's something that we have to correct.
I also want to say, exactly what Stephen has pointed out, that, under Doug Ford's Conservatives, he's spending $5 billion more than we did in our last budget. And Ontarians are not getting any more services, that they really count on. There's a fight right now with teachers because he wants to put cuts into the classroom. The healthcare system in some areas, like in mental health, is stalled. There are no more supports in place. And so, that myth has to be busted, that Conservatives are somehow managing the economy better than we as Liberals. It is absolutely not true.
Kate.
This is what I think Ontarians are not looking for. So, I hear your comments around Doug Ford. I agree with them, but I don't think that Ontarians are looking for us to just blame this government for the spot that we're in. The fact of the matter is that our debt has accumulated under governments of all stripes. What they are looking for is a concrete plan. So I am not going to put any time or energy into blaming the current government. I think we all own this together as Ontarians. What we need is a long-term financial plan that is well established by economists, people who know this stuff very well, and a commitment across parties to stick to it. That's how we get ourselves out of this situation.
Brittany, you want to come in on that?
Well, I mean, my focus in my campaign has really been on growing the economy. I think that's what I hear from people is, what are you going to do to grow it? And when I look at all of the missed opportunity in this province, we've got millennials who are generally underemployed, working multiple jobs, never going to have the kind of career that I had, for example. I see that as missed opportunity, and we want to we want to deal with the deficit and grow our economy. We need to get them working the way they can in the full capacity. We need to grow our biotech, our green tech, our high tech, expand opportunities. We need to work with our trades so that there are tons of jobs that are not filled because we don't have bodies to fill them. I think that's the emphasis that Liberals want, that voters want. Let's put Ontarians to work so that they can participate in the economy, grow the economy, and then we have money for the programs that Liberals love to make people's lives better.
Alvin, last word on the economy here.
Steve, we can't do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. I'm one of the 2 millennials on this stage, and we've got a completely different set of circumstances now. We're expected to have 3 to 5 different careers over our lifetime. We have more education than any previous generation before us, on top of the fact that we have more debt than any generation before us. We're also looking at the fact that we need to change that structure. We need to change the game. And you often have here Hugh Siegel on this program. And Hugh and I have talked extensively around the need for us to change how we support people in this province. And what he talks about is a universal basic income. And we had a pilot. Doug Ford broke his promise. He canceled that pilot. I want to bring it back, not just the pilot. I think we're ready to do this moving forward because right now we have over 2 million Ontarians living in poverty. And as like Michael said, if we were a country, we'd be the 20th largest economy in the world. And it's unacceptable right now that 1 out of every 5 children are currently living in poverty in this province.
This is the rail blockade near Belleville, Ontario, and there are demonstrations in Ottawa and in Toronto, and these are sympathy protests, frankly, all over the country. Sympathy for the /protesters/land protectors. Rail lines have been blocked. We know that Via Rail employees, I think 1,000 have been laid off. There is a tremendous amount of economic dislocation as a result of these. Are these demonstrations/land protection efforts/protests, I want to make sure I've got all my bases covered here, are they legal?
Of course. This is a constitutional expression of our free speech, of our free assembly. It doesn't mean that it can take place 365 days a year. No. Are there possibilities in the future for rotating protests or strikes or blockades or protection of land? Possibly. But is this something within the capacity of individuals, whether Indigenous or not? 100%. And the
even if injunctions have been put forward by courts.
Right. Okay. So let's separate 2 different issues. Okay. One is involving Indigenous people, where treaties were signed, agreements were made, our Constitution actually. I would say that injunction is wrong in law in the same way as the injunction that applied in Caledonia was wrong until it was overturned. And in that case, the Ontario Court of Appeal said, when there was an injunction put in place in Caledonia to boot protesters off the land, as they were called, the rule of law is a lot bigger and more complicated than the application of a particular contract in a particular transaction. We need to take into account the Indigenous rights and the Royal Proclamation and the constitutional law. And as such, in fact, the test for an injunction was not made out. Number one. Number two, whether it's legal or not can become an academic exercise. I think what's more important is what do the police do? Do the police escalate it? Or do they de-escalate it?
And can you confirm for us, politicians do or do not have the right to tell the police what to do under these circumstances?
Right. So we know from the Upper Wash Commission, Sidney Linden, former Chief Justice, has made it very clear politicians do not have the legal or constitutional authority to tell police what to do. Not the Premier, not Bill Blair, the Minister of Public Safety, and not the Premier of Ontario or the Premier of British Columbia. This has to be an independent police decision. Otherwise, we have a police state, and you'll have a situation where a Premier doesn't like someone, so they send in the police, and it becomes partisan and not independent.
If the Premier believes the police have overreacted, can the Premier call the head commissioner and say, Could you guys please back off? You're making my life crazy here.
It depends on the time. I'll tell you that when during the time in which we were in government post-Dipperwash, there was paranoia about communicating with police in any way, shape, or form. There are ways to do it between the public affairs minister and the head of the RCMP in the same way as the Attorney General can have a conversation with the Chief Justice generally about the way things are going. And they can pass laws and set policies as to what the practices or the limits of what police are. And that's democratically accountable. But operational decisions, no, that's a business of police only.
Deborah, let me get you to speak to this, because over the last few weeks, we have heard references to this being this is a moment where some Indigenous people are describing this as the beginning of a revolution that is going to change the nature of everything going forward. Do you see it that way?
It could, but then that's probably what we said about the OCA. That's probably what we said about.
I'll know more.
Yeah. But I think all of that's informed this moment, and I don't think it's like this moment. It's like everything leading up to this moment, and finally we're having, I think, a different conversation that we're starting to see, and that people are asking different kind of questions. They're saying, well, what about Indigenous laws? What about hereditary? How does that work? So people are asking, I think, more informed questions than they had, let's say, 30 years ago when the OCA crisis happened, or even during Idle No More. So I think, but I think there's been a lot leading up to this moment. But I have to say, I do appreciate that people are asking different kind of questions about this time and how do we move forward.
Dr. Hoda, let's get started with this. It's been a month now since people heard about the coronavirus, now officially with a new name, COVID-19. How much more do we know today about how infectious this disease is than we knew a month ago?
I think we know quite a bit more. As we get more experience with additional cases and people start to summarize those and publish their experiences, we start to see some information that's coming across consistently. And I think one of the things we know is that this is transmitting from person to person. And we look at something called a base of reproductive number, or an R0, which tells you on average, if one person is infected with the virus, how many other people could be infected by that individual.
And what's that number?
And so right now it's looking like it's somewhere between 2 and 3 for this virus, probably closer to 2. So that helps to give us a reference compared to other viruses that we're more familiar with in terms of how infectious it is.
And is that a relatively, it sounds like a relatively small number, as opposed to, we're not talking thousands here, right?
Yeah, well, so you have to put it in context.
Okay.
So it's comparable to what we see with SARS, for example. However, what we are seeing is that we're continuing to have these chains of person-to-person transmission that happens on and off within, China. We're seeing quite a bit of it, but also outside of China. And so in that sense, it's behaving a little bit differently from what we saw with SARS, where it was a little bit more limited in terms of where we saw the infections occur.
Are we getting a more accurate picture today of how deadly it is?
We are. So over time, we're, again, summarizing more and more cases of people who are infected with the virus. And it looks as though about 2% of confirmed cases, lab-confirmed cases, are resulting in death. Now, the problem is we don't know the full extent of people who are actually infected with much more mild illness. And so likely it's lower than that.
And again, that, relatively speaking, is a pretty good number?
I think it's, it's good or bad. It all depends on how many people end up being infected with this. And because there's no pre-existing immunity amongst the human population with this new virus, this has a potential to infect quite a few people over time. So you just have to kind of watch what the numbers are doing and also see if there are any trends in terms of some risk groups being at higher risk of dying. And right now, it does appear as though those who are over the age of 80 tend to be at highest risk of dying from the disease.
Which takes us now to Mario Passamai. What differentiates what we're experiencing right now from a full-blown pandemic?
Well, a pandemic is kind of a soft definition. It's really sustained transmission, in a number of continents. So right now, it's, we have major cases in China, of course. A few cases here. More cases in Hong Kong and Europe and the UK. But we're not there yet. But I think the major difference with SARS is that SARS was primarily nosocomial. It was primarily transmitted in hospitals. Here we're having more spread in the population. There was a paper that came out. I got it emailed at 4 o'clock this morning, and it showed that they looked at 74,000 cases in China, and they found that about 1% were asymptomatic. So these are cases that were lab confirmed as being carriers of the virus, but didn't show symptoms. So there are a lot of wrinkles like that that are coming out that are important and interesting, as our knowledge evolves about this new coronavirus.
But to be clear then, if SARS, which Ontario experienced, I guess, 17 years ago, if that was mostly an illness that was transmitted in hospitals, as opposed to this one, then this one's way worse, right? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. So early on in the SARS outbreak, no one knew whether it was going to be community spread, and in fact, there was an early plan, and Dr. Hoda and I were talking about it, and it was really based on the BC pandemic plan because, sadly to say, Ontario did not have a pandemic plan those days. So there were preparations for community spread. Luckily, we didn't have to see that. But I think it gave us a taste of, even if it's restricted to healthcare facilities, what damage an outbreak can do.
Well, and this one's clearly not restricted. Of course, the epicenter was China, but then, of course, we're now seeing it's on cruise ships now, and we're seeing the impact that's having, never mind on that industry, but anybody who might have been on the wrong cruise ship at the wrong time. What does it tell you about the fact that hundreds of people who are on cruise ships are now getting infected?
Well, the study that I got at 4 o'clock this morning said it's pretty darn obvious, but I said, this is highly contagious. And we also don't know enough about it, about transmission dynamics, all these things. So it's early days. And, I think the other important thing is that what we're seeing now is unprecedented. About 10 years ago, the CDC and the U.S. Department of Defense and some other groups had a workshop, and I was down there with Alison McGeer, with the Canadians, and it was looking at were there historical experiences, whether it was Spanish flu or any other epidemics, that could help us, inform us if we had to do big things in response. Big things like quarantine a city or things like that, things that China's doing now, and there were no historical examples. So, what they're doing is unprecedented. Shutting down a city, a cruise ship, a quarantine cruise ship. So there's no playbook. And so, I think some mistakes have been made. I think probably, in hindsight, the quarantining of the cruise ship in Japan was probably a mistake.
We'll get into some of this in a second here, but Susie Hoda, let me ask you this. If you are fortunate enough to survive receiving this virus, what's it going to do to you?
So most people are recovering and having no sequelae of the infection. Those people who actually end up in the hospital and need a higher level of care or die from it tend to get complications either from overwhelming pneumonia or the immune system getting so overstimulated by trying to fight it off that you go into a shock kind of condition. And so that's what we're seeing in terms of the actual morbidity of it. If you recover completely, we're not entirely sure if you're going to have immunity that lasts for some period of time or if you could be reinfected with this virus again in the future, like we see with some of the other coronaviruses that circulate seasonally every year within North America and throughout the world.
And that's just some of what we covered this week on the agenda. For more, including the full versions of those conversations, you can always visit our website. That's tvo.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed at twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.